We'll call this meeting to order. If you would, Madam Clerk, take a roll call.
Okay, Mr. Braun.
Present.
Mr. Moore.
Present.
Ms. Pace-Snook.
Present.
Ms. Reclus.
Present.
Ms. Sabacher.
Present.
Mr. Shiverdecker.
Here.
Mr. Simmons.
Here.
And Mr. Stone.
Present.
8 council members present.
Thank you. And we have my good buddy Ron Baker here to do our invocation. If you would, sir.
Let us pray together. Father, we're reminded that the Apostle Paul encouraged us to pray for those who are in authority. We pray for those in national leadership, in state and county, and those of local leadership. And we recognize that these entities are temporal, and only God is our eternal authority. And in this time, we thank God for his many blessings, blessings of freedom, of friends, of family, and of community. Tonight, we pray for Mayor Cannell, Director of Administration Bill Johnson, the members of the City Council, and each employee and servant of the City of Fulton. We're grateful for their willingness to serve and that they give of their time in serving our community. Tonight, we pray for wisdom, for discernment, for fairness, and responsibility. We ask that you guide our council members and mayor and other participants as they deliberate issues that affect all of our citizenry. Father, we would also pray for worldwide needs, especially those affected by the coronavirus and the disruption that it causes and the sickness and death that it brings. We pray for a vaccine and a stop to its spread. We pray God's continued blessings on the city of Fulton. Amen.
Amen.
I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. Okay, at this time we have comments from visitors. And let me just start by saying it's great to see a full house. For whatever reason, I think the council members would agree. It's good to see some involvement here. But we'll take comments. Please keep them brief to 5 minutes or less. And state your name and address. And we're ready for whoever would like to speak.
My name is Richard Lell, and my wife and I live at 308 East 5th Street in the Bell Historic District. To save time, I'll read my comments. I might also preface that I was on the commission which wrote this in 2002, the old ordinance. Under the 2002 ordinance, the Preservation Commission and the City Council offered owners of historic properties 2 options to obtain identification as a historic property. Once a sufficient number had applied and been approved, then the Commission and Council created historic districts requiring a minimum of 10 recognized properties within a defined geographic area. Option 1 in the old ordinance. Property owners could request identification as a Fulton historic property. If no request was made, no designation would follow, and therefore their property would not count toward the minimum 10 required to establish a district. For those of us who chose this option, the city made a written assurance in the ordinance. 62.30.4. The Historic Preservation Commission shall, quote, review and recommend to the City Council the identification of properties and structures as city historic districts or as city historic properties. Again, remember, this is a quote, without attaching to those districts or properties any restrictions for receiving this identification. 62-31B, which is entitled Fulton Historic Property. Subsection E, quote, no restrictions, either stated or implied, are attached to properties because of their identification as a historic property or because they lie within a historic district. Section 62-32 through 62-39 do not apply to properties because of their identification as a historic property or because they lie within a historic district, end quote. Section 6232 through 39, in case you've forgotten, which do not apply according to the old ordinance, concerns requirements for design guidelines, construction permits, application reviews, etc. If the council adopts this new ordinance, it breaks the assurance given to owners made to encourage them to apply for historic designation, given them twice in writing. If it adopts this ordinance, it is saying to those of us who ask for historic property identification that we, the city, deceived you. We're adopting bait and switch. Now that we've gotten you to apply for assurances with no restrictions, now we're going to change the name of the game and impose restrictions. Yes, the council is saying, while the old ordinance makes clear no application for or review of designs or construction or other things you might want to do will apply to you, now by our dictate, they will apply. I remind the council that option 2 in the old ordinance did allow for restrictions, including those laid out in this new ordinance. But they only applied to those who voluntarily accepted in writing these restrictions. Those properties would be recognized as Fulton preservation properties. It is my understanding that during the 18 years the two options have been available, not one person has applied for Fulton preservation properties with restrictions. So in creating its historic districts, the city has relied on those owners who were assured no restrictions would apply. By breaking that assurance, in my view, the city is acting dishonorably. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
Well, I'm speaking specifically about, I think I've lodged this in writing before, but I wanted to state at the outset that I'm, although opposed to the current bill
I
under
apologize really
consideration.
quickly. Could you give me your name and your address, please?
Mary Van Orden.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Mary, what was your address?
305 East 5th Street.
Thank you. Please continue.
Let me state at the outset that we're really not opposed to historic preservation in the least. What we are opposed to, and what my husband and I are opposed to, is the language in this particular proposed ordinance is very confusing. When we had the opportunity to be designated under the bill that was just talked about, we chose not to do so because of fear that this eventuality would come along, that now there aren't any, but there's going to be at some point in the future. So making a historic property a home means that you have to have the flexibility to live in that home, to grow with the technology, to protect it for generations and generations to come, so that you have a living building that is something people can live in. There are a few problems that I see with the current ordinance, and I'd like to point that out, or current proposal. First of all, I outlined some before, but 6231 is the identification, and right now I can see no assurance in this bill that those of us who live in the areas designated would not be required to live under this ordinance. So we choose not to participate. We'll take care of our own. We certainly want to follow all the city ordinances that there are due to safety, but sometimes we have to make decisions at the last minute about how to do our house. Case in point, replacing a roof for us meant having to make the decision of whether or not to bear an unreasonable expense in recreating and reconstructing a chimney that had long been neglected. In our case, we chose to remove that and have the tip of our roof redesigned. Under what I'm reading here, that would have taken us up to 60 days to make a decision about. We had 2 days to make the decision because there was a hole in the roof of the house. So I think that many aspects of this, especially the design review, 6232, creates an undue burden on property owners. The requirement that we submit not once, but maybe multiple times to a review that might take up to 30 days and might end up causing us an expense of time, energy, money in terms of submitting a proposal or putting together a proposal seems to me to be unfair and unjust to the property owner. It's just not property owner friendly. Generally speaking also, think about this. What is an emergency and who determines it? A hole in my roof was an emergency to me. It might not have been. It was a nice sunny day. Maybe I had another week's worth of bright future of weather, but at the time, we made that decision quite quickly, and we just didn't have anybody else's interest in mind except our own. And that's how it should be when you own a piece of property within the city limits of Fulton, regardless of whether it is something that has been designated. So I strongly urge the council not to pass this bill for a third reading tonight, to slow down, take a look at the language, make sure that it's appropriate, that you have things clearly defined, and that especially in terms of who's coming, if I'm a property owner in a district that you've identified that has not and chosen not to become a designated property, just because I'm in a district, I don't want to be necessarily required to become one and to live under the ordinance. So there's nothing wrong with it.
1 minute remaining.
Nothing wrong with that at all. It's just a matter of, please slow down, take a look at the language, make sure that you're being fair to all of the people involved. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Mary.
you.
Thank you.
My name's Anthony Caviani. I live at 506 East 5th Street. There was a meeting here last night with Zoning and Planning Commission and the Historic Commission that was open to the public that I attended. And listening to some of the folks on the Historic Commission talk about some of the struggles they may have had over the years with historic preservation in the city of Fulton, sounds like they've tried to do some things to help create a sort of preservation ethic, if you want to call it that. But mandating that people in historic districts adhere or have to get recommendations in order to get a permit from the city to make recommendations only further alienates those property owners from wanting to preserve their home. And what I mean here is that I heard a lot last night about how Fulton is perceived and the perception of Fulton, and that we've taken down all of these types of historic properties and things like that. But this ordinance, as written, is so void for vagueness, and it is left up to the interpretation of the Historic Preservation Commission to interpret its enforcement. I'm going to just give you a couple examples. On page 1, under section 6225, it talks about alteration. The first definition in the entire bill means any act or process that changes one or more historic, architectural, or physical features of an area, site, landscape, place, and or structure. And then it goes on to examples. It states landscape, right? So to me, I'm reading that, I'm like, okay, if I make an alteration to my landscape, I'm going to have to get a recommendation from the Historic Preservation Commission in order to get a permit from the city to do something. And then it goes on more to talk about exemptions on page 9, and it talks about exemptions, landscaping. Write down the next part on page 9, design review application, subpoint B, and then number 1, applications for design review, accompanied by a site plan showing the location of the building or buildings, parking, exterior, lighting, signs, and landscape. This is one of many examples, along with the designation of what a historic home is. There are also homes within the historic district that are not historic that shouldn't be part of this, right? So if you want to cultivate an ethic of preservation, which I think a lot of people are for, mandating that people adhere to it is not from what we see as homeowners, not the correct path to go about doing that. There's also something in regards to policies where a policy should be net beneficial, meaning it should benefit more people than it harms people, right? And this bill, as obvious from things that we have seen over the last week or so, is not net beneficial because people are speaking up and telling you it's not net beneficial. If you were to cast a net over the entire city of Fulton, and especially the people that are impacted by this bill, because let's be honest, not everybody lives in a historic district, but some people that live in a historic district don't have historic homes. If you were to cast a net over that and see if it benefits more people, they're telling you right now it doesn't benefit them, right? So that's enough of a reason to vote nay on this ordinance, right? Some of the commission, or some of the purpose of the bill, I think, is the purpose of it is not, like the motivation for the ordinance is not captured in the ordinance itself, right? So I should not have to justify what I'm going to do to my home to a group of historic preservation commission in order to make modifications to my home. I should have to go through this city, right? There's also something about the non-binding nature of this that's gotten a lot of talk, right? So the Historic Preservation Commission makes a recommendation to the homeowner in the historic district, and then it's non-binding, right?
1 minute remaining.
Sure, but the binding nature of that is that you still have to go to the Historic Preservation Commission in order to get a permit, right? So, as homeowners in these historic districts, we are concerned that just because you put non-binding in there now, what is to stop something from becoming binding in the future, right? So it's not that we're against an ethic of preservation, it's that you need to make it optional. If you really if you really value historic preservation, get people involved and educate them on this issue so that then the people that want to preserve their homes according to your standards and your opinions and your viewpoints and your perspective of what historic preservation is can get that. But don't mandate that I do that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anthony.
I'm Megan Klukowski, and I own the home at 506 East 5th Street. I wanted to speak on some of the points that Anthony actually just brought up, but first I wanted to caveat that I fully understand and would support the spirit of this bill. We purchased a historic home because we value history. We value the architecture, and we value all the aesthetic things that come with a historic home. And so I applaud the spirit of this bill. Yet, I also want to inform you that the purpose for purchasing a home is that we are then free from judgment. If I want to sit in my home and wear pajamas, I can, right? And nobody should be able to judge me. My home becomes a representation of my personality. It is, if I choose a certain lighting outside, that is to reflect my personality. This bill, in fact, is actually infringing upon those choices and the reasons why I would actually purchase a home versus rent. If I can't choose a house color because it doesn't go with the historical period, then why would I purchase a home in Fulton? Because I wouldn't be able to do that if I were renting anyway, and it would be cheaper. So what that does is, on the other end, if I were to try to sell my home, people would also look at it in the exact same way. You gain freedom when you purchase a home. This is now taking away or limiting the amount of freedom that we can express very quickly in our own homes. Additionally, I wanted to ask, because this is such a personal topic, I'm assuming, and maybe by a show of hands, how many of you own a home in Fulton?
We have to
Yeah.
serve.
You gotta live here.
Okay, and so then how many of you actually own a home in the historic district?
And we're not here to answer questions, just for
Right.
your information.
Well, I know that not all of you are required to actually live in a historic district, but those of us who do own a home are not required to live there because we have a mortgage. What happens is that this does affect us who live in those historic districts. To paint that picture in that scenario of how it does burden the homeowner, my husband and I are both teachers, and I am currently putting myself through grad school. That's a lot. Now, if we look at what it would actually cost for me to hire somebody to come in and draw up architectural plans so that I can properly submit these to the commission in order to apply for a permit. That right there, I looked it up, simple Google search, it says that architects would cost $2,500 to $8,000 to draw up full property plans. Now, we don't have that kind of money. So if we need to make some sort of change to our home, because let's say our wood is rotting, our home is all wood, if it is rotting, we're already done. So that also means that my time is no longer valued either, because we would then have to save up and save up and save up, who knows how long that would take. Then we would have to hire this architect. Then after that, our budget is depleted, so now we would actually have to go back and recreate our savings. Then we have to do all this paperwork, wait for approval. We'd have to attend a meeting. And oh, by the way, even though it's non-binding, according to the language in this document, if we don't attend that meeting, permits will not be issued from City Hall. How is that not binding? So if we attend this meeting, we then have to wait for the permit. We then have to schedule a contractor. Hopefully they have an opening for us now.
1 minute remaining.
Yep. Then we need to begin. So therefore, what happens is our time and our money is depleted. For somebody who truly cares about historic preservation, it becomes almost impossible for us to do that through this bill. And so, as a result, what this does is it starts infringing upon our rights as homeowners, and it starts infringing upon our ability to practice the property ownership process. Therefore, I strongly urge you not to pass this bill, because it would absolutely destroy our budgets, and it would make it impossible to comply. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Megan.
My name is Will Hoffman. I live at 502 East 5th Street. Just want to bring up a few points to address the proposed historical ordinance. First of all, as it is written, there's many contradictions within the ordinance that is confusing. Contradictions, as been mentioned, landscaping, but also seems to address the fact that the Historical Commission doesn't really have a clear understanding of what needs a permit. As we talked about last night, things that needed a permit, the commission thought would have to go through a review, but we didn't need a permit for it. I also feel that this also takes away freedom from the homeowners, because we have to jump through hoops. We have to get reviews. We have to come up with money to get drawings done, even for landscaping. Does that mean if I want to take a shrub out of my yard, I have to then come up with a plan and then submit that and wait upwards to probably 30 days to get that approved, to take that out and put something new in? Also, this is a blanketed ordinance. With many programs like this around our country, these are a opt-in sort of ordinance. If you want to buy a historical home on the historical roll, you know what that is when you go into it. This is basically telling every home in the historical district, if it is a historical home or not, you have to abide by these rules. Again, this is forcing people to obey something, again, taking away the freedom of the homeowner. I'll be very honest with you, as my wife and I were driving around Fulton today in the district, looking at the different homes within the district, looking at some of the homes falling apart in the district, we remembered why we bought a home in the historical district, why we bought a historical home. I love history. I watch This Old House 24 hours a day because they do have a channel for that now. So I love historical homes, and we bought our home because of that nature, because we had to find a place within 20 minutes of my work and 20 minutes of my wife's work. Fulton was that middle ground. We bought the home looking at many homes, and we fell in love with our historical home. We love it. However, now it's tough to live in Fulton. We have actually thought about buying up property, other properties in Fulton, to get more younger families to come into Fulton. I have 2 young kids. I live across the street from the Missouri School for the Deaf. I love our community. However, we know that Fulton is not filled with nice people. We see the police reports and all that are posted on the websites from the police office, and we want to bring that back to this town. We have thought about investing in our community, buying up property to rent, to get other young families to come in. However, because of the things that have taken place with this ordinance, we don't want to buy property anymore in Fulton. In fact, I'm one step away from putting a for sale sign in my front yard. And that's sad, because I love my home. Another thing I want to address tonight is the info on this, and I will admit part of this is my fault. I don't normally attend council meetings, but I can guarantee you that you will start seeing my face in this chamber more often. I don't read the Fulton Sun other than going online when I want to. I don't usually look at the Fulton website other than to know if my recycling is going to be picked up on certain weeks. However, I live in a historical home. It was built in the 1870s. No one from the commission knocked on my door. No one on the commission asked me for my opinion. No one asked if I would want to be part of this. I am just being told that this is something I may have to be a part of. I'll be very honest, last night we got a list of comments from your all's website, emailed in, and a majority of them were negative on this. I think you've heard it tonight that the majority so far has spoken that this is a negative thing. I would say just look at the contradictions within what is written and realize that this is not good. That's all I got. I would ask that you please say no to this and let us be free.
Thank you, Will.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Scott Jones. I live at 906 Nichols Street. I live in a home that was built in 2017 and is in the historic district. I will also reiterate what a lot of people here have said and say that I am for historic preservation. I think we have a great community. I think it is filled with some great people. I am against this ordinance, however, as it is written. One reason is the involuntary inclusion of homes in the historic district to adhere to this mandatory review. In the existing ordinance in section 62-32 through 62-39, any properties with little to no historic value are exempt from regulatory restrictions. In the new ordinance, all properties in the districts must adhere to the non-binding mandatory review. I am speaking tonight because I also have not been asked my opinion on this ordinance despite living in Fulton in the historic district. Despite the ordinance being talked about in the paper, on Facebook, and through these council meetings, there are only a few hundred properties that this would affect, and I feel it'd be nice to have been contacted prior to an ordinance being written, and I believe that an open channel of communication between the FHPC and property owners in the historic districts could have cultivated a better ordinance that we could all get behind. Another sticking point for me is the vague language in the ordinance, particularly, and I'll give a couple examples here, page 7, 62-32E, which states properties identified as Fulton historic properties are subject to the non-binding design review, et cetera, et cetera. By contrast, on page 8, 62-32, the very first sentence says, this section shall establish a mandatory non-binding design review for all construction and/or demolition located within the Fulton Historic Districts. So page 7 says only properties identified as historic, and page 8 says all the properties in the historic districts. Contradiction. Furthermore, in the same section on page 9, again at the top of the page, letter A, says exterior facade improvements that require a permit on all structures located within the historic preservation design review area are going to be mandated to go before the review. Jumping back to page 7, it says properties identified are subject to the non-binding design review for demolition and new construction, including additions, repairs, and renovations that change the exterior of the property. So page 7 states all exterior changes must be reviewed. And page 9 states only exterior changes that require a permit are to be reviewed. I'm concerned about the lack of consistency and the arbitrary interpretation of the ordinance. I believe these issues could deem the ordinance to be void for vagueness in the Missouri Constitution and open the city up to potential lawsuits in the future. I urge the council to vote no. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. All right.
Hello, my name is Susanna Wolf, and 8759 County Road 142 in Williamsburg, a commercial property at 400 West 4th Street. I just have a few things I'd like to touch on, and I appreciate all the council members who received my phone call and took the time to talk to me. I think that there's been a lot of really good points tonight made, and so I could reiterate and go over those again as I have reviewed this section 62 to see what all was in there, and just a lot of vagueness, a lot of inconsistencies. I want to talk on a few points here. The proposed chapter can be interpreted as preventing demolition of a structure when a replacement design is not yet determined. I also noticed in section 62, chapter 32, that there is a missing word. I assume by the reading, the intended word for that is shall. It would not be detrimental to the purposes. This provision would allow the FHPC to prevent the demolition of a structure by withholding a waiver of design reviews in such cases. It would also granting the FHPC the authority to delay or prevent the demolition of a building in contrary to the purported non-binding nature of mandatory design review under the proposed chapter. It also, although the proposed chapter contains a definition for the term certificate of economic hardship, it does not appear to establish a process whereby a property owner could obtain such a certificate in the event that a demolition permit is denied by the FHPC. There's just a lot of vagueness within the articles, and some of it I feel may, trying to find myself. The U.S. Supreme Court has ruled when a regulation is found to have taken property, just compensation must be paid for the period of time during which the regulation denied of all use, even in the deprivation, is temporary. So that may infringe on our Constitution, our country. So what I would ultimately like to see, and because I don't want to see this go away, I own a historic home built in 1889. I value history in our town. I think it's important for our tourism. I think it's important for our city to have this. However, I would like to see it be more, would you like to get information about historic properties and how to keep the historic preservation of your property? Or even if you're building a new home, just let it be offered. Just maybe a little line on the permit saying yes or no. I also do not feel that this should be binding to businesses. Businesses, when they come in, they need to get their signs up and all of that. And I've seen in here that there is a section that states specifically a site plan showing the location of the building or buildings, parking, exterior lighting, signs and landscaping, exterior elevations of the front and side with a description of the type and finish color or exterior siding, windows and roofing to be used, detailed drawings of architectural features, signs and trim, and historical as-is photos of the subject building or site and adjacent structures. As a homeowner or a business owner, am I going to run around and try to find pictures of, subject buildings or site adjacent structures? Like, some of this just seems unreasonable for a basic person, and I can read this language pretty good, but I struggle to read this because there are so many contradictions within here. So I would like to see businesses not necessarily be mandated under this. And, what about emergency repairs? Thank you. What about emergency repairs? Emergency repairs should be considered, and what's considered an emergency. So I would just like to see you vote no tonight so that it can be better reviewed. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, someone else coming up. I think I know this guy.
Yeah.
Me again. My name is Chuck Garrett. I own a 105-year-old building downtown at 110 West 4th. I'm also a licensed real estate broker. So you all should have all in your hands, hopefully. We sent the proposed ordinance up with the existing ordinance to the national level with the National Association of Realtors Land Initiative Program to review it. And so there were several talking points and things on that. We had the meeting last night with FHPC because I said that I would do that, and we made it happen. I owe Nancy Lewis a public apology because I said grammar last night, a grammar error, and it should have said drafting error. So I want to publicly apologize to Nancy Lewis. So anyway, so in your little talking points here, I'm not going to bring up everything that the public and some other people have brought up, but on pages 11 and 12, .08, talking point 08. So it talks about the proposed chapter contains several apparent drafting errors, suggesting that the proposed ordinance remains a work in progress and is not ready for review and adoption by the City Council, period. That's my point tonight. So there's several things in here. The poor adaptation of another jurisdiction's historic preservation code. When they were adapting from other ordinances, we lost some cross out of line. So, and it breaks all those down. It talks about like certificate of appropriateness. One of the comments on that. The proposed chapter does not establish a process for issuance of a certificate of appropriateness. Additionally, under the proposed chapter, the FHPC is not granted the authority to approve plans, but may issue only a certificate of review or waiver of review. So if we go to the next one, it says certificate of economic hardship. So the comment on that says that the proposed chapter does not expressly authorize or establish a procedure for the FHPC to issue a certificate of economic hardship. Then it talks about the Secretary of the Interior standards. So it says, while this definition refers to standards for the treatment of historic properties, the text of the proposed chapter references only Secretary of the Interior standard for rehabilitation and guidelines for rehabilitating historic buildings. So the next point they brought up was landmark. And they said the proposed chapter in the new ordinance does not include a procedure by which the City Council may designate a landmark. And then we go to the next page, and it talks about the stop work order. And it says the proposed chapter does not establish a process for issuance of a certificate of. Then we go to the next term. The terms exterior architectural appearance and cultural resources are also defined, but not used in the rest of the proposed chapter. So the comment on there says, sections of the proposed chapter reference several terms, but not these defined terms. Similar but inconsistent use of terms may lead to confusion or inconsistencies in application of the proposed chapter. I think that has been echoed tonight by most people who've gotten up to speak on some of the things in the ordinance. So the incorrect cross-references, it says proposed section 62-32C contains 2 incorrect cross-references. First, it references the design review standards established pursuant to section 6232A, but the design review standards are actually located in 6232D.
You have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. Second, it refers to the 30-day review period and prescribed in subsection 5 of this section, but the 30-day review period is actually located in subsection 4. So you really can't pass something that's got that many errors in it, in my opinion. So it also states here uncertainty regarding the status of existing Fulton preservation properties. The proposed chapter would eliminate the Fulton preservation property designation altogether, but does not explain how such properties would be treated under the proposed chapter. Would all existing Fulton preservation properties automatically become Fulton historic properties upon the adoption of the proposed chapter? It also just suggests that the existing Fulton preservation properties would no longer be given special recognition under the proposed chapter, depriving such properties of the prestigious recognition that the owners presumably desired in pursuing the Fulton preservation property designation in the first place. So,
Sorry, that is your time.
all right, thank you much.
Thanks,
Thank
Chuck.
you.
Chuck.
Yeah.
Hi, Rhonda Braun, 1004 Herring Drive. I'm continuing on what Chuck just left off on for the talking points for the City of Fulton Historical Preservation. If you turn to page 9, and we're talking about point 6. Under this, it talks about minimum maintenance. Part of the highlighted part states that significant exterior architectural features should be kept in a condition of good repair and maintenance. Then if you skip down to the next paragraph, it talks about this provision appears to impose an affirmative obligation on the owners of property located in a Fulton Historic District to maintain existing structures as to prevent decay or deterioration and not or architectural character of structures. It is not clear, however, whether or how this provision would be enforced by the city or what the penalty would be for a violation of the minimum maintenance requirement. Under the city's code, general penalty provision, it appears that if no specific penalty is provided, a violation is punishable by a fine of not more than $500, imprisonment for a term not to exceed 90 days or both. Additionally, it is unclear precisely what an owner of a property located in a Fulton Historic District would have to do in order to satisfy the minimum maintenance requirement of section 62-32D10. That is because section 6225 of the proposed chapter contains a definition of minimum maintenance that differs from the minimum maintenance standard described in proposed section 62-32D10. Minimum maintenance to mean. Given the apparent discrepancy between the definition and the minimum property maintenance standard described in 62-32D10, it is unclear precisely what the minimum maintenance standard is under the proposed chapter. Now, you'll see that quite a few of us here are realtors tonight. And the reason that we are here is not because we're nosy bodies. It's not because we don't enjoy historic properties. We love listing them. We love selling them. We love bringing people to this town that enjoy those homes. But we as realtors, we're your professionals that's telling you how we feel this is going to negatively impact property values in the city of Fulton. This type of information has to be disclosed. Whether it's on a contract, when it's on your listing. There are no guidelines currently in the Missouri Association of Realtor forms. And we use the Missouri forms. So the likelihood that the Missouri forms is going to adopt something strictly because Fulton has decided to pass this ordinance, it's not going to happen. So we're opening ourselves as realtors up to liabilities. And we are professionals. And part of the reason that we're here and we're getting involved, we're taking the sides of our clients that we've sold homes to in these districts is because we abide to a code of ethics based on the National Association of Realtors. Article 1, the realtor should keep himself informed on matters affecting real estate in his community, the state, and nation, so that he may be able to contribute responsibly to public thinking on such matters. Article 2, in justice to those who place their interests in his care, the realtor should endeavor always to be informed regarding laws, proposed legislation, governmental regulations, public policies, and current market conditions in order to be in a position to advise his or her clients. Thank
1
you.
minute remaining.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rhonda.
Thanks, Rhonda.
Okay. Up. Popping up from everywhere.
I just wanted you to get settled in and comfortable.
Thanks, Doc.
Who lured this, Wanda? Maybe Chuck and I should have come up right after each other. Good evening, my name's Doc Kreitzer. I live at 5055 Pendergrass Road, Fulton. As many people have already stated tonight, a lot of the discrepancies that are in the ordinance as it's proposed, so I'm not going to reiterate any of that information on it. I just kind of want to give you a little perspective. I'm a licensed realtor, have been for 20 years. I'm an investor in this community on it by having several rental properties, one of which happens to lie in the proposed the historic district. My concerns, I came last night to the public forum. It's 50 years old, and I learned last night that apparently, once they become 50 years old, they can have historic significance. But I bought that as an investment property on it to rent. I would feel differently if I was going to live in a home and want to maintain it, but most tenants could care less about historic significance on it, and they aren't going to take care of the property the way I would like to have them taken care of, especially if it's historical. I would not have a historical property as a rental. Some of these people that have success with bread and breakfast and B&Bs, more power to them. I'm glad that's working. Maybe I don't do a good enough job on screening my tenants. The Fulton Historic Property designation, I'm not real clear on that, but my understanding is that there is an application that if someone chooses to have their home having that designation on it, can apply for that. Most of the homes that are being proposed in the historic district, there are 3 times as many homes not of the Fulton Historic designation than there are that would have. 6th Street, most of the homes out 6th Street, many of us used to rent, or some still do, to college students. We bought those properties with that in mind. There happens to be a home on 4th Street that was built in the 1880s that isn't in the historic district. Yet, why did they stop there at 5th Street? They picked it up, but not 4th Street. Maybe they could have gone on down Jefferson Street and picked up the 300 block. If it's a 50-year-old home that can now be a historic property, are you going to be looking at Vine Street and Grand Street? Because those are all older homes on it, many of which needed to be torn down, many of them needed to be rebuilt and redone. So my concern is, how are we going to try and control that?
And I'm very much supportive of whatever the people have been saying here tonight and the current concerns that are being brought out. So that's my point, and I would interest you, as the way the proposal is currently proposed on it, I would think that probably a no vote would probably be the best decision that we could make. Thank you all for your service as a council member and a way to serve your community.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you, Doc.
I knew it.
Well, my name's Brian Fuller, and I'm represented by Steve Moore in Ward 1. I own a property on Court Street, and I've been a proprietor there and I've run a business for 40 years plus. When I bought my building, it was covered by a beautiful cheese grater. Most Court Street had aluminum awnings and facades that were put on in the 60s. And I'm sure that the people that put those on thought they were going to improve business. There was some sector of business that they were after that modernization was going to help. It was going to be the ticket. We've taken them all down. If we had a crystal ball on what's historically preservable and what's not, wouldn't we have a shrine around the sign painter's house and his yard? So many people would just consider that blight. To appoint, to be on a panel of people who are going to make these judgments. And when you have so much ambiguity in the text, it seems like an immediate no vote for you guys. But the real perspective I wanted to share with you is how unaffordable the district is becoming. It's hard for me to put numbers together on a building that I own and consider it a rental and know that anybody could pay that rent and make it. So any other cost burdens put on me to maintain that building would probably leave me in a position of let it decay. I was faced with that. I'd occupied the building for some 25 years without any maintenance. The last facade that just like ours. And that really isn't what makes you turn your head when you drive through or into a town. It's whether it's painted up and it looks occupied, no matter whether it's a bike repair shop or a brew pub, it's occupied. And that's the #1 selling point of any community. But I do urge you to vote no on that ordinance as written.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no one else come forward, we will, Pat?
All right. I knew he was late.
I'll wait till I get up there so you heard that light.
You take your time,
Take
Mr.
your
Payne.
Yeah, I appreciate the break. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Courtney's hands wore out, yeah.
First of all, if you look on your desk, you should have had a color map.
Yep.
I'll be back in April to go back to my history lessons for you. That map deals with Elizabeth and Fulton's relationship. Shows you where Elizabeth is and was and will be. It's still there, it's on County Road. If you want to go by it, you'll see a modern fire building where it was. On the other side is the original plat information for the city of Fulton, or excuse me, town of Fulton. It's not a city yet, it hasn't been chartered by the state. You can read at your leisure. That is from Bell's, A Short History of Cowley County. That's Bell, the newspaper publisher and printer, not the architect. Okay, I've got a 10-page letter here about the subjects of discussion from last night. Don't worry, Courtney, I'm not going to try to get that in 5 minutes. I'm going to pick 2 points. One, I'm going to come to the defense of the Historic Commission a little bit. They were tasked by the City Council to get this done. They were tasked to do this. They did it. They approached a granting review state-level commission. That commission gave them a model ordinance. They brought that ordinance back. They watered it down. They tried to pound it into the existing ordinance in such a manner that it would pass. It's sort of like the committee that was tasked to design a better horse. They did. It was called a camel. It was better than a horse in some ways, not as good in other ways. Another thing to consider is they had no support for a lawyer. I prefer Mr. Garrett's first interpretation about grammar. In the law, every word, every comma has a meaning. That's why you pay a lawyer to give his opinion of something that's written in English when you speak English. Okay, I'm going to take both of those points. Now I'm going to refer to my notes to Courtney. Let me know when I run out of time.
You're doing okay.
I'm fine.
We'll go to page 10. Does the city government have any responsibility to maintain the historic nature of Fulton? If so, how? If you want citizen input, make sure you give citizens an opportunity on both sides to give you input. Not everybody has a website. Not everybody has a computer. Not everybody, even now, even though it's been in the newspaper, knows about this meeting. Some people will never show up at a city council meeting. The ordinance probably should be tabled again. I would suggest you not kill it. I would suggest you send it back. And then, like I said last night, you need an arbitrator. The council can serve as that arbitrator.
All right. Anyone else? Going once, going twice. Again, we appreciate everyone's input. Everybody's welcome to these meetings at any time, and you're welcome to speak and give us your concerns, whether it be good or bad or indifferent. We do appreciate that and welcome that. So we'll move on to approval of the consent agenda. Council members may choose to remove an item for discussion prior to approving the consent agenda. We have 3 items tonight: approval of the council meeting minutes of January 28th, approval of council meeting minutes of February 11th, and approval of the DOA report of January.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda as written.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Mr. Moore?
Question, I can do it in council concern, or move it off at the Director Administration Report. I had a few questions.
Go ahead.
Pull it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd like to amend my
Motion to
Motion.
remove?
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll make a motion to remove the director's report.
Ms. Pace Snook, are you seconding that as well? Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure, good. Hearing no other comments, we'll call for the question. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Okay, so we'll open up the DOA report.
Kathy's turn.
And Mr. Moore, go ahead,
First,
sir.
oh, thank you. You know what's starting on. My first one was on the animal shelter.
Oh, yeah.
I was looking at some of our adoptions, and I was wondering that during the first street fair in May, is there a possibility or too much trouble for animal shelter or the city if we set up a booth for adoption of some of our animals in the animal shelter during that time?
During the street fair?
Mhm.
Okay.
Just asked and not saying that.
There was no
actually do
judgment
it.
there. I
Yeah.
apologize. I was making sure I heard you correctly.
Yeah, no, you heard me correctly. It might help in some of the adoptions, and I noticed that we're still doing a good job with outgoing and adoptions in there. And then my other one on there was, I'll get to that, because we will, was I noticed in the back that, I know people work on these to give them to us on, Michelle was doing pretty good here in the recruiting of jobs, so it did, maybe you're doing more success now lately, or? Okay. And could someone, Robert or Darren, give insight about the website usage? I noticed that it's
Report.
Nope, fine.
Motion to approve the Director of Administration report.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any other concerns or comments? I'll call for the question. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Very good. And we'll move on to the financial report for January. Ms. Holschlag.
I have just a few things of interest to tell you. We've recognized the last month of sales tax collections for 2019. We're up 1.1% over the prior year. Okay. January was the 3 payroll month, but the first payroll was for time worked in December, so we had to accrue that back to 2019. So expenses are not proportionately higher like you would typically find in a month with 3 payrolls. Other than that, it's January. Most of the things we're paying, we're accruing back to December, so there's not a lot of activity for the month per se. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I just had a question about the computer software, why there was such a big discrepancy of different departments having different amounts.
Based on the use, a lot of it's based on the use of the individual departments, on what they use of the software package, and some of it has to do with how much the individual departments can afford.
So the allocation is per the budget.
Gotcha.
That's how that percentage is determined.
There is some thought put into the allocation of the expenses.
That's the only
Motion.
thing I had.
Motion to approve the January financial report.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. Any questions on that? I'll call for the question. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Very good. Thank you, Kathy. And we'll move on to unfinished business. We have none, so we'll move on to new business. We have representative from the Callaway 200 Committee to request permission from Callaway County Bicentennial Bash and the 10K to be held Saturday, May 30th, 2020.
Or maybe we don't.
Myself and several department heads met with the group and outlined some of the requests and the proposals. This is obviously something they don't do every day. To develop and meet some of our city's expectations as far as what they're going to need. I mean,
So
one big stumbling point, they're going to have a band downtown, and the band requires three-phase electricity. We don't have it downtown. So they're going to get a hold of the band again and see if the band really has to have it. If they really have to have it, something's going to have to be done.
And there are two members of the committee here this evening, if there are any specific questions. Myself and Doc Kreitzer both sit on that committee.
Right.
But I know that the equipment that,
Three.
my apologies.
Yes,
My
three.
apology. But I know that the equipment is being rented through the committee, I believe, not necessarily being brought by, I think some stuff is being brought by the band, but most of it's being rented through the committee, so there might be a lot of opportunity with that three-phase.
Rent some different stuff.
That's,
Those are
I'm
loudspeakers.
saying there might be some opportunity there, but I'm not involved in the details of the band, so, but there's probably some opportunity there.
And the group understood the shortcomings and the problems and the issues, and it's in May.
There's 4 members of the committee here this evening.
Oh, there's 4. Okay.
What's the date?
May 30th,
May 30th. So
Saturday.
there's lots of times to develop and coordinate and get our plans together. But I would encourage the city council to approve it.
Motion to approve under the guidelines set by Mr. Johnson.
Second.
Oh, his shoulders.
John, is that a second?
And just item of discussion, this is going to be a heck of a party, folks. We are celebrating this county's 200th anniversary. It is a birthday party of all birthday parties. We are going to have a free concert downtown by Shenandoah. There's going to be all kinds of activities that whole weekend, both the Friday, the Saturday during the day, the Sunday. The churches in this community are stepping up to have a huge event in their churches and Sunday afternoon to celebrate the religious history of this town, and it's about where we are today. It is not there is no focus on any negative history of this community. It is all the positive history of this community and where we are today. There has been a lot of talk tonight about the history of this community, and this is about the whole county. And the entire county, all 45,000 people in this county is going to have a chance to celebrate all year long. And we're going to have a big old party that weekend.
Great.
Under the guidance of Mr. Bill Johnson.
No pressure.
Save the date.
Now, Jeff, are you going to be leading a Couch to 10K program for this?
Yeah.
I can. We are having
There you
somebody
go.
is sponsoring a 10K. There's
Yeah.
the YMCA is sponsoring a 10K run that morning on Saturday. And after shoulder surgery, I'm going to need a Couch
All
to
right.
10K program. So yes. And lots of stuff. Please watch the Fulton Sun. There's a website. There's all kinds of stuff out there. There is lots and lots of activities.
for, which is just a waiver of the fee for our annual picnics, which take place at the Memorial Park Pavilions. And the dates for those picnics are May 17th and September 13th. And my understanding is that in the past, it was simple to request that just by making a phone call. I understand that policy's changed, which is why I'm here tonight to make the request to the council. Does anybody have any questions about the picnics?
Move to approve the waiver request for both dates.
Second.
Very good. I have a motion and a second. Any questions or concerns? Hearing none, I'll call for the question. All those in favor say yes.
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 Opposed, no. Very good. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Yep.
Okay, council concerns. I'll start to my right. Councilman Shiverdecker.
I have nothing this evening.
Groups to come to us for fee waivers. There are a lot of groups. Couldn't we give Clay and Parks and Rec some guidance as to what we feel like needs to be waived, and then
March 10th meeting.
At your chair is a fee proposal schedule.
yes?
Got it.
It has been compiled by the city clerk. All the department heads have submitted their assortment of fees. In there, you will see something from the rec board concerning the fees on the shelters and whatnot.
Okay.
I don't think there's a lot of intent to discuss it this evening.
Yeah.
It is for you to take home, read, review, and next council meeting, we will discuss it I think we're even gonna do the work session. It's gonna be on the fees included in that packet. So please take it home, read it, comment, and when we come to the work session, be prepared to discuss it.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Good question.
That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Simmons.
Yep.
Councilwoman Seebacher.
Well, Anne Mary kind of stole my thunder. But, I
Well,
just,
share.
again, want to thank you. I'm so thankful to see such involvement, and again, with the contact, the emails, phone calls, text messages. Some people come into my job. It's wonderful to see, and I'm so thankful. So thank you all for coming.
Very good. We'll move on to resolutions. Councilwoman Pace Nook, if you would present resolution number 3369.
Yes, resolution number 3369, a resolution authorizing the mayor on behalf of the city of Fulton, Missouri, to sign all necessary documents in relation to the Assistance to Firefighters Grant and authorizing the city's monetary match. I make a motion to adopt resolution number 3369 at tonight's council meeting.
Second.
This is a matching grant.
For new radios and equipment for the fire department, 5%, local match would be between $10,000 and $11,000.
Okay.
And this is not in our budget for 2020.
It isn't.
So we need to talk about. Sounds like a good deal. Good luck. Hearing none, I'll call for the question. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Move that on. Moving on to ordinances, Councilman Moore, if you would present Bill 1579.
Bill number 1579, an ordinance amending Chapter 110 Traffic and Vehicle, Fulton City Code by enacting a new Section 110-188 to be titled Financial Responsibility and establishing an effective date. I move this for second reading at the next regularly scheduled meeting by title only.
Second.
Mr. Sterner, is that why he's here? Mr. Sterner, is this why you're here? No. Would you like to speak on this?
No equivocation there.
Well, I think he was the author. Mr. Myers,
Yes, Mr. Myers.
would you like to come up and give
Chief.
your version of Mr. Sterner's work?
We can't really tell you that, can we?
Under the direction of Mr. Fulton.
Yes, it pretty much explains why we'd like to have this. If you have any questions, and I'll give it, a speed is probably not a good example because we have speed ordinances in town. A DWI is a good example. If they stop someone for DWI and they don't have license, then, or proof of insurance, then we have to write them state because we're not allowed to split the tickets one state and one city, and so therefore we can write them.
You answered Steve's question, and I couldn't get you up here.
And we do have, and we are looking at some other ordinances that would, we think, benefit the city as well, and so hopefully in the coming months, we will be presenting them as well.
I'm still lost. I don't understand it. I'm still confused.
We can't split tickets.
Okay?
Well, if you have a violation that is not a city ordinance violation,
Okay.
and then you have a violation that is a city ordinance violation, we have to write them both state because they will not split.
I see.
You can't send one to state
And
and
one
one to city,
Okay. Okay.
basically.
Thank you. Okay. That's okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
And I think it's not a case where we're trying to have a cash cow here. It's just us getting paid for the work that we're doing. Is that fair to say?
Certainly, because many, not always, but sometimes it's a lesser fine in the city anyway, I think. I don't know what the fine schedules are, but sometimes it's a lesser fine anyway. So it's actually better, but the city does get something out of it that way.
Very good. Thank you, Chief. Any questions on that or comments?
Please, everyone have insurance
Yeah.
and have your card with you.
Yes. Makes it easier. All right. I'll call for the question. All those in favor say yes. does anyone have any concerns or questions on this? Hearing none, all in favor say yes.
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 Opposed, no. Very good, if you would again.
Bill number 1577, an ordinance allowing the Show Me Green sales tax holiday to apply to the local sales taxes of the city of Fulton, Missouri between April 19th, 2020 and April 25th, 2020, and for subsequent Show Me Green sales tax holidays unless otherwise enacted by the city council by ordinance. I make a motion to place bill number 1577 for final passage at tonight's meeting.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second.
Third. Fourth.
You
Go
got a
on,
comment?
I'm just talking.
Okay. You start answering yourself, we're going to get worried.
I shake my head yes all the time.
Any questions? I'll call for the question. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. You've all heard the bill read 3 times. We'll now defer to our city clerk, if you would, for roll call for final vote.
Okay, Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Ms. Pace Snook?
Yes.
Ms. Reclus?
Yes.
Ms. Seebacher?
Yes.
Mr. Shiverdecker?
Yes.
Mr. Simmons?
Yes.
Mr. Stone?
Yes.
Mr. Braun?
Yes.
8 council members affirmative.
Very good. This is very similar to the last bill. Does anyone have a question or concern on this?
I just had a thought. We have a bunch of different visitors in the crowd, and this is something that we do on a regular basis, but every year we have to go back and do this ordinance. So to fall within the state where we don't have to go back and do it every year is why we're doing what we're doing with both of these. So they will be automatic, but we will keep you notified on the
The way it works, so I don't know, some people might, maybe that'll help somebody understand what's going on. Thank you.
And our phone numbers are on the website, emails. Any questions, we're here
Yes.
for you.
Please do.
Anytime. Thank you. Are there any concerns on this, questions? Hearing none, I'll call for the question. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. And if you would again, Mr. Simmons.
Bill number 1578, an ordinance allowing the back-to-school sales tax holiday to apply to the local sales taxes of the city of Fulton, Missouri, beginning the first Friday in August and continuing through the Sunday immediately following, and for subsequent back-to-school sales tax holidays, unless otherwise enacted by the city council by ordinance. I make a motion, we approve bill number 1578 for third and advance to final reading, or for final approval tonight.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any concerns? Hearing none, I'll call for the question. All those in favor say yes.
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 Opposed, no. You've heard the bill read 3 times. I'll defer to our secretary for final vote.
Okay, Ms. Pace Snook?
Yes.
Ms. Reclus?
Yes.
Ms. Seebacher?
Yes.
Mr. Shiverdecker?
Yes.
Mr. Simmons?
Yes.
Mr. Stone?
Yes.
Mr. Braun?
Yes.
And Mr. Moore?
Yes.
8 council members affirmative.
Very good. 1578 passes. All right, moving on, the moment we've all been waiting for. Bill
Yeah.
number 1576, if you would, Mr. Braun.
Bill number 1576, an ordinance repealing Chapter 62 of the Historic Preservation Fulton City Code and enacting a new chapter in lieu thereof.
If possible, the input from citizens, work with the commission. The commission, invite as many people as you can, work together, and bring back a ordinance that I believe we can all live with. That's my motion.
Second.
Okay.
And
so
just to
it's-
clarify really quickly, Councilmember Clue, your motion is to table this bill indefinitely.
Indefinitely.
Okay, thank you.
So we can do that, it doesn't, tabling it doesn't just automatically move it to the next meeting?
If you table.
So to give them more time, hopefully work together, I think we can agree on an ordinance, and we do need one.
So.
Very good.
I'll second your motion.
We actually already have a second.
We have
but
it a
thank you
second.
very
Okay,
much.
then I'll third it. Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Any other comments on this? Is everybody good with this?
Oh, I'm good with table it, but I have some comments on it, but let's go ahead.
Well, you go ahead if you have some comment.
Well, I think that the commission has spent 6 years working on it, and Mr. McDaniels has been a good chairman. I do believe that a lot of the verbiage needs to be cleaned up.
Yes.
And when I believe that there's enough minutes have been taken, that the commission knows exactly where their downfall is in that ordinance. If their meeting should be posted, and if someone wants to attend, they can do that. But my experience over the years, if you get that many people, you're never going to have an ordinance back for years, because there's going to be a point where, as Mr. Payne says, you're going to have to get an arbitrator out to help you finish the bill.
Okay.
That's my concern about it. Okay. Other than that, I will vote to table it this evening.
Very good. I have a motion and a second. Is there any more comments or concerns on this? Hearing none, I'll call for the question. All those in
Yes.
opposed, no.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
I would like to I make that motion,
I'll
yes.
second it.
Is that something they're willing? I get a sly smile there.
My only concern with that, John, is just
Both.
we do it for this, or are we going to do it for everything else that comes down the pipe? And
Well,
I mean,
This is
this is a big deal, and I hear where you're coming from, so.
This is a commission that we have asked to sit, and if it's a way to help them transition from where they were to where they wanted to go and find a happy medium, I feel like it's a start in the right direction to get more involvement within the community.
So, John, well, never mind, go ahead, you asked it, I was gonna say.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna suggest maybe the council could get it with the commission, instead of putting a dollar sign there, let's see where we could really go to help them out.
Well,
first.
If that's what you guys would like to do, I just made the motion. I'm making a recommendation that I feel is trying to help them out.
Need some help.
Try to help the whole thing out. Whether we have to help them physically, I'm okay with that too. I would be happy to put lists together in the flyer and everything else. I'd be happy to help them get those mailed out.
I would almost like to see the historical commission come to us and say, this is what we would like to do, this is what we need the help,
Okay.
versus us dictating to them what we want them to do.
Oh, I'm not asking to create the flyer. I don't want to
understand,
create the
but-
flyer. But that's just.
I mean, I'm
with the property owners within the historic districts, all of the community, pay for newspaper ad, advertiser, whatever they
could
feel
put a
their
mailer together
communication-
for $500, I
Yeah.
would think, so.
Oh,
I mean, And
Mr. McDaniel, please,
sure.
you deserve to have some
Yes, he
time
does.
here.
Yes, he does.
The Historic Preservation Commission has been drugged through the mud. That's about as good as I can say. We're volunteers, okay? I am not an ordinance writer. I let all the people that were going to come on the positive side didn't come, and I'm not going to parade them all down through here, until we go to another point. But that would, I think, help. Bill, you've sat in on some of our meetings. Is that?
Yeah.
David, could I give you a suggestion on your meeting times?
Sure.
Is there a possibility, because you typically have your meetings at 1 o'clock in the afternoon when people are working, I know myself included, could that be something that you could look at to adjust to a later time in the day?
They, I think everybody really, and myself included, is we want to see the opportunity for property owners when they want to make an improvement, when they want to make a change, to receive the input from the historical commission. Let them get your knowledge. so much knowledge and so much information that your commission provides. That's the spirit of it. They want to hear your input, they want your involvement. It's just, how do we work out the logistics of it? How do we let the rubber meet the road, that sort of thing. And I think that's where we need all of the input. That's the conversations I've had with everybody that's contacted me. I've voted all along that, you know, we need to support the spirit of the ordinance. It's just finding a way to make it work for those that have the specific question.
Sure. Well,
That's the positive piece that I want you to take away tonight.
Yes.
David, I also, last night at the meeting, I stated that I would be in favor and in support of, and I had two different ideas, and tonight is my first sign of the first idea that I have, and that I feel could help.
No, and
that's exactly why I did. I said I would.
It's a good idea.
And I would be willing to do that as well.
Me too.
So just to clarify.
I don't know what I want to clarify.
Okay. I'm not sure. Okay, so perhaps we would discuss this at a work session in the future. Would that mean that you are withdrawing your motion?
At this point, I would withdraw, unless you want something different, David, would you? Okay, so we will withdraw it at this time.
And Councilwoman Reclus, would you withdraw your second as well?
Yes, yes, I-
Okay, thank you.